CEO of HealingMaps Incorporated. Cory, welcome to the Benzinga Psychedelics Capital Conference.
Thank you very much.
How you doing?
Good. I live in Miami, so.
Woo. Let's give it up for Miami. Who else is from Miami? I want to see some hands. Anyone from Miami? Just one. Okay. Cory, tell us a little bit about you. What do you do? What does HealingMaps do?
So a little background on me. I've been in the digital media space for about 20 years. Cut my teeth in a number of publications in the early 2000s. Moved to LA where I launched a couple sites for AOL. And moved to Playboy at one point.
Oh yeah, you've always been a disruptor. By the way, this is the guy who's responsible for nudity being taken off Playboy.
This is true. Yeah, this is.
I don't know if I should thank him honestly or ironically. I'm still
Yes.
I'm still on the fence about it.
This is going to be on my professional tombstone super quickly. I relaunched Playboy.com, got put over Playboy, the magazine, as well as chief content officer there, and I led the charge to remove nudity from Playboy in 2015. I had to go to the mansion and pitch hef on what a non-nude Playboy would look like, which is a story better told over a cocktail than at a conference.
Well, that definitely helped you somehow pitch HealingMaps, I assume, like pitching disruptive ideas.
Yes.
That are tough sales.
It was a really difficult idea. A lot of people had a lot of opinions about it, I would say. And so I've been in emerging markets, if you were, for quite a while. Yes.
We'll go back to that, but I'm very curious as to how this experience, for instance, helped you now pitch HealingMaps, presented to investors, presented to potential customers and partners, right? Again, I assume the experience of pitching such a disruptive idea.
Yeah, you gotta have some conviction in what you're doing because you're going to get some blowback. But I came into the psychedelic space about 3 years ago. And before then, I probably had all the stigma that the general population has right now. I've been a dabbler in my earlier days and knew that there was benefits, but I don't know if I was able to articulate their benefits in a way until I actually started working with a company called Psytech out of Israel, which was acquired by Wasana last year. And I got a front row view for the biggest researchers, clinicians at the biggest vetted institutions, and saw the decades of research that existed and the potential benefits of these compounds, and just saw the scientific backbone. I remember specifically a Matt Johnson presentation about the cessation of smoking. And I was like, there is these reams of data, these reams of clinical research that is out there, and the general population doesn't know about it. They still have this sort of like stigmatized view of these compounds that is like sort of stuck in the 60s.
Oh yeah.
And I looked around and there were 1,500, I believe, ketamine clinics in the US alone since 2017. And so we really wanted to start HealingMaps as a kind of Yelp for psychedelic assisted therapies because the general population doesn't know that these compounds have these amazing benefits and there's the scientific backbone to lean on. They also don't know that it's legal and they don't know it's right down the street.
Yeah, no, totally. This hits very close to home, right? Like I am a young liberal who's been working in cannabis since 2013. I'm supposed to be progressive, and maybe 4 years ago, someone took me out for lunch in New York City. And they told me psychedelics are the next big thing. I'm like, dude, you're tripping. Like, of course they are not. Like, I can see my mother getting comfortable with the idea that CBD is medicine, cannabis is medicine, but I don't see her tripping on acid. And he goes like, that is not it.
Yeah.
Right.
What's been amazing in those last 3 years is you could just feel the change. So we launched HealingMaps. We've been growing. We launched about a year ago. We cover ketamine clinics, ibogaine retreats, ayahuasca retreats, psilocybin retreats, and we wrap it in education because to your point, our North Star is the soccer mom in Kansas or the football dad in Kansas. Right, there's a lot of conversations, a lot of arguing going on in Twitter and on social media. I think that is not speaking to the potential consumer and the psychedelic curious patient who is out there. We need to speak their language, and so that's our goal.
what do you envision treating, right? Like you say, it's the soccer mom in whatever, Arkansas or Arizona.
Yeah.
Well, what are the applications of psychedelics in these cases?
Well, it's interesting. We get people writing in from every state asking, and it's sometimes it's parents looking for treatment for their sons and daughters. Sometimes it's sons and daughters looking for treatment for their parents, their mother-in-law, their father-in-law. And it spans across all demographics. It's really, really interesting. And they're looking for it for depression, for addiction, for anxiety, for the wide array of ailments that we talk about in terms of mental health.
How do you see this industry being different from cannabis? And I know this is a loaded question, right? Most people in the psychedelics industry, we don't love the comparison with cannabis, but at the same time, it's kind of inevitable because it's the development of a new industry, something that was considered to be a drug, right?
Yeah.
And the drug in the bad way. How do you see it evolving differently?
So I was also in the cannabis media space for a little while as well. And the big difference here is the scientific research and clinical data. That is the backbone that is going to change people's minds. Cannabis never had that, right? It was, you'd get your medical card and it would be a wink, wink. You'd go to a doctor and you'd say, I got a back pain, I got a headache, I got whatever. And he would give you a card and you'd be on your way. But no one, I don't think anyone really looked at it that way. It was just sort of this kind of like thing that you had to do to get through, almost a loophole. With psychedelics, and this is why we launched HealingMaps, was because the data will change people's minds, right? It will change people. We are reframing the way people are looking at these compounds right now. And you've seen it in the articles, you've seen it in just the media coverage. And you see people who are going through these therapies, who they're sometimes their grandmothers, sometimes they're teenagers. It is a wide swath of people who's believing in it because they can look at the data, they can look at the science and the clinical research. That's the big difference that cannabis doesn't have right now.
So, I mean, can you emphasize a little bit or elaborate on the importance of this clinical research and where do you see it going?
I think it's going to be used to change people's minds at the end of the day. I mean, people will look at it as a medicinal opportunity because, Johns Hopkins and Imperial College of London just has vetted research about it, because that's when you look at really stigmatized industries, those are the things that you can build on.
Definitely. Now, and where does, HealingMaps come in there in terms of not only educating, but also maybe like democratizing access to psychedelics, right? Because they're not always easy to access. And even like you said, okay, there were like 1,500 ketamine clinics. Most of the ones I had seen before, until a couple of years ago, were in kind of shady strip malls in California. Yeah. Right? It was not particularly friendly.
Yes, we cover the ones that are vetted by and run by certified medical professionals, and we cover all aspects of those. We only want to sort of stay in that realm, as it were, right now. And so what we do is we're a very geo-targeted site. So if you're in Miami, you go on the site, you want to find a ketamine treatment near you. You're going to come in Miami. If you're in Arkansas, you're going to find Arkansas. And so we really want to wrap. So we have the clinic listing side. So we let people know what therapy is available near them. But then we also wrap it in the educational content, whether that's very optimized keywords that we cover, the questions people are asking, but also the personal stories. And that is another huge destigmatizer. When people see people who look like them going through this journey that maybe they're scared of, maybe they're worried of, and coming out the other end with a positive experience, there's few things that are more powerful than that.
Totally agree. For me, I converted a bunch of my mother's friends after interviewing Jane Fonda. I was like, if it's good enough for Jane, it should be good enough for you.
Exactly.
When it came to cannabis, right? And
totally.
I feel like there is a similar situation where you need to see someone who looks and talks and feels like you, saying, "Hey, this is not tripping like in the 70s, right?" And again, the guy who I was talking about like 4 years ago, and he was like, "Hey, psychedelics are the next big thing." he was dressed in a suit, he was wearing a tie, he looked clean, right? Like, just, you know, he looked like a businessman,
right?
Like someone who could run an asset company any day.
And that blows people's minds sometimes, talking about this stuff, you know?
I know. And, you know, I think this is framed in probably a larger mental health discussion, right? I think America has really had a reckoning throughout the pandemic, especially on mental health and the attention it needs, and how many communities, especially minority communities, haven't had really good access to mental health treatments or options. How do psychedelics play into all this? How do you see them playing?
Well, I think we've all seen that mental health is becoming more in the mainstream. It started, I think, generationally, but that is going across generations. I think we're in a mental health pandemic right now. There's a lot of issues, but people are more open to talking about it, and people are more open to new treatments and new opportunities. And that's why we are seeing a bunch of people talking about, you know, psychedelics and interested in them, because the old treatments haven't necessarily worked, right? And these new treatments, they're foundationally different. And there's the potential to actually solve some of these problems instead of just mask them. And so that's why we're covering, you know, we cover psychedelics. That's what's the focus of us right now, because it's the biggest need in connecting patients with these clinics. But we cover all things mental health. We're going to grow to cover every aspect of it, whether it's alternative to mainstream as well.
What does the investment opportunity look like for HealingMaps? Is there anything like, are you raising at all? Are you like, and because again, like you're talking about diversifying revenue streams, and I'm like, okay,
yeah,
you're gonna make some money.
Yeah, yes. Well, our revenue streams are varied. You know, we have clinics right now who are clients. We cover all components. Every psychedelic clinic, every retreat that we have. We're also expanding to basically cover everything mental health, whether it's TMS treatments, whether it's psychotherapists, whether it's psychologists. The HealingMaps umbrella will cover every aspect of this huge emerging mental health market.
You're a big advocate of building trust and transparency in the industry.
It's the most important thing. Well, it's the most important thing you have to do in an emerging market that is especially tied to stigma. If you don't build a trusted brand, if you make one hiccup, I think it's harder to get over that hump again. So you have to have trust. You have to have transparency. You have to, when you talk about education, you've got to be vetted. You have to make sure that when you're talking about a medical component of anything, you have to back that up with a vetted medical professional to approve and vet everything you're saying.
What else do you think, people should know about HealingMaps, about this industry that,
Well, I think when we talk about emerging markets, we have a big, I'm a big fan of data and understanding data and collecting data. And so we have, we're collecting an understanding of who these people are, who these new patients are. And I can tell you, we did a little report on about 40,000 people who were interested in psilocybin treatment yesterday, and 1.2% of them are named Michael. Like, that's not very actionable, but we also know every component of what magazines they read, what websites they go to, what influencers they follow, what cars they drive, what foods they eat, everything they drink. So we're going to really understand every component and every facet of this new patient, as well as we are having conversations with every clinician and every retreat and every doctor who's in the space. So we're going to have a full, comprehensive 360-degree understanding of this entire space and be able to activate that moving forward.
Fantastic. Real fast, how can people reach you, interested investors, and of course, people who are interested in HealingMaps, which HealingMaps.com, right?
HealingMaps.com. You can check us out there, and I'm on LinkedIn, and I'll be wandering around all day today. You can
drop an email.
Shoot me an email. Cory at HealingMaps.com. CORY.
So Cory, CEO of HealingMaps. Check him out. Awesome stuff. I love the platform. Good friends of mine as well. He was a former editor of mine. I just remember that for a very brief time.
Yes, exactly.
Cory, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Javier.